maybe you're struggling with being a little self-focused or maybe a lot self-focused when it comes to sex. And so if you feel like that's you, let today be the day you stop and actually go and talk to your spouse. Welcome back to Fridays with Dave and Ashley on the XO Marriage YouTube channel, where you get real marriage advice from real people just like us. And you guys, we are in the midst of our busy conference season. We have so much fun, and we've met a lot of you along the way. If you have not gone to an XO Marriage conference, go to xomarriage.com and get tickets. So today, we're going to share a little podcast episode with you from the Naked Marriage Podcast.
Yeah, this has actually been our most popular podcast of the year so far, and the episode is called 10 Things Married Sex Is Not. And we're going to give you a clip from that episode because it's gotten some great feedback. So take some time, watch this, discuss it with your spouse, and we hope it leads to a better, more fulfilling, more connected sex life between you and your spouse. Enjoy.
Some people may laugh at this, but I think it's a really important one. And so number 6 is that sex should not be boring.
Yeah.
Okay?
It should be the opposite of boring.
The opposite of boring.
If it's
right.
boring, you're doing it wrong. And
but in all seriousness, I do think people fall into ruts where,
Sure.
you know, it's just kind of like, I think maybe in a busy season, we can sometimes find ourselves in the place where it's just very quick. You know, you kind of are prone to just doing quickies just to meet that quick need, but you're not really engaging with each other. Or maybe you just are stuck to one position all the time and just not willing to explore anything else. Or just kind of not even engaged even with your mind. You know, sometimes people are just kind of
you just kind of get an autopilot.
Right.
Like, yeah, this is all right, but I'm just kind of an autopilot, and we're missing out. Now, I will say, though, the fact that it should never be boring doesn't mean that it's always going to be like the same. We do a talk this year at the XO Marriage Conferences, and one of our talks all these are based on our book, The Counterfeit Climax, which we've talked about a lot because we just feel like this book could really help in your sex life. So check it out, particularly the audiobook version, which we had so much fun recording. But in one of our talks at the conferences, and you should come to an XO Marriage Conference if you have not. They're so much fun. We do a talk called The Seasons of Sex, and we have 4 different chairs representing the 4 different seasons of sex. And they all start with B. It's beach, babies, busy, and broken, and how in your marriage you're going to move in and out of these 4 chairs as it relates to your sex life, and how sex is going to look different in each one. Now, sex doesn't have to be boring in any of them, but just so you have the right expectations, it's important to know sex isn't always going to be like as hot as it is in that beach chair, so to speak. Like in different seasons of busyness and babies, and where you're struggling with broken issues physically and emotionally and otherwise, that there are going to be adaptations made, and it's just going to be different, but it can be beautiful in every season.
It's so true. And so I think the main thing here is just, again, communicating, talking about it, saying, you know, just ask your spouse, and be ready for an answer, be ready for their honest answer, but say like, do you think our sex life is boring? I mean, just ask them that. And if they're like, you know, kind of searching for an answer, it might be yes, and they don't want to say it because they don't want to hurt your feelings, because it's not necessarily a personal attack, but because it takes both of you. So, you know, if they're kind of like, well, I don't know, and be like, well, the reason I'm asking is because I want to make sure it's not boring. So like, how could we change that? What is your idea of making it more exciting, of making it more enjoyable, of not getting kind of stuck in a rut? And then just kind of go from there.
Yeah, it can lead to some great conversations. All right, number 7. And again, it's number 2 on this episode, but we're in part 2. If you're wondering how we started with 6, go back and listen to last week, the first 5. So 6 and now 7. Sex should not be one-sided. So it takes 2 guys. It takes 2. So, you know, that's partly why we talk about, you know, we've talked about masturbation on the podcast, that, you know, in and of itself, you know, might not always be necessarily, quote, sinful, but one of the dangers of masturbation is that it trains your mind and body to view sex as a solo sport, basically, to one-sided. Like, I know what I like, I know what feels good to me, and I'm now just going to kind of use my spouse to recreate that feeling that feels good so that I can move to my climax. And instead of really making love, it's almost like you're just masturbating with a person assisting you. Right. And sex is so much more than that, guys. It's physical, emotional, spiritual, all happening at once. And if it's just about your pleasure and what you like and your climax and all those things, then you're missing out, and your spouse is certainly missing out, but even you are missing out because it's meant to be so mutually enjoyable.
It is. And even just having kind of like the posture, so to speak, in your mind and heart of looking at sex as just being something that fulfills your needs is really not putting yourself in the right position, because of course we have needs. Like, we're human beings, and God created sex. It's something that for most of us, and anybody who's married listening to this, obviously it's a need that we want fulfilled. And that's good. That's all fine and good, but we can't look at that as the only aim, as just fulfilling our own needs. We really need to remember that in marriage, sex is a way we can serve our spouse. And so it's really about making sure that we're connecting with each other, that we're making sure our spouse is having their needs met as well. And there's just something so beautiful about that when we see it as this joint experience that we get to share in together. Because when we're just kind of focused on us achieving a climax personally, it really is missing out on the entire purpose of sex. And that is to connect, and to connect in a really special way that is not only physical, but it's spiritual, mental, and emotional. And if we're only focusing on ourselves, we're kind of ignoring our spouse's needs, and we're really disengaging from what sex, was designed to be in marriage. So don't want to do that.
So true. So true. Number 8, sex should not be guilt driven.
Yes.
And, this can have multiple meanings
Yes,
as well.
it can.
So, sweetie, why don't you lead off with this one?
Yes. So we should never have sex because we're afraid if we don't, our spouse is going to be mad at us, or our spouse, always feeling this guilt, or, I guess I should have sex with my husband because, he did do the honey-do list or whatever, or, feeling like they're going to hold it against us. It's this guilt involved in this. And because that's really, again, that's not embracing sex as being this place of freedom within marriage. And it's also, you're kind of going in with the wrong feelings, because you're not going to enjoy sex if you're feeling guilty the whole time, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so much more than that. I mean, there are times in marriage and in really all parts of life where sometimes you have to move forward in doing something and let your feelings catch up.
Sure.
Because, if you never feel like talking to your spouse and you just never talk, then you might lose the desire to talk at all, and your marriage could really suffer. If you never feel like having sex, then you might never have sex, and then you're going to lose the desire to ever have sex, and then your marriage is really going to suffer. And so there are times that I think that you have to lead your feelings by saying, no, this is something that I need, that my spouse needs, that our marriage needs, and not out of guilt,
Right.
but out of a healthy view of priorities, that I'm gonna lead my heart here,
Right.
and let my feelings catch up. But guilt is what takes over when it's just, there's all this negativity attached to sex itself, and
Yeah.
it's maybe shame over over your own past or your spouse's past, or broken views you had about sex growing up. Maybe it's just guilt that you feel like it's owed in this kind of weird transactional
Right.
way, which
Yeah.
isn't healthy, and we've talked some about that already. And so if you're feeling those things attached to sex, then you really got to get to the root of why. Like, where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Is it my spouse that's intentionally putting this on me, or unintentionally putting this on me, or is it something coming from just within myself that I need to work through? But it needs to be dealt with, because there's so much more that God wants you to experience, and guilt is not part of it.
Absolutely. All right. Number 9, sex should not be self-focused. And this is similar to one-sided, but it's different in this way. So what we mean by sex should not be self-focused is where whenever, you and your spouse are making love, that you're the one who's calling all the shots and how you do it, when you do it, and you're kind of focusing on you just getting to your climax because it's your preferences all the way, that you're just focusing on yourself. That's not going to get you anywhere. I mean, you might have a climax, that's great, but you're going to have a terrible marriage because you're not tending to your spouse's needs. And so if you're totally focused on everything you want and you haven't asked your spouse, like, well, what do you like? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? Or what time of day do you feel more inclined to make love because you have more energy and more desire that time of day? So if you have not asked those questions, then I would venture to say maybe you're struggling with being a little self-focused, or maybe a lot self-focused when it comes to sex. And so if you feel like that's you, let today be the day you stop and actually go and talk to your spouse.
So good. So good. One more.
Yes.
Sex should not be duty driven. And we've kind of hit on this
A little.
already,
Yeah.
but there's so much more to sex than just this sense of obligatory duty, or to use like a dictionary.com word, perfunctory.
Perfunctory, yes.
Where
we just learned this word.
Right.
Somebody commented perfunctory.
I had to look it up.
What is that word?
So you can look it up now, but it fits with this. It just don't go go through the motions out of the sense of duty, this bored sense of obligation, because there's so much more to it than that, guys. And so so much what we talk about on this podcast and in our books is to kind of just help reignite the passion, not reignite just kind of the sense of duty, like, oh, well, I guess we'll do it. But so much more than that, where sex is something that you both really look forward to.
Yes. Hey guys, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you liked what you watched today, we have so many episodes over at the Naked Marriage Podcast. You can actually watch that on the XO Marriage YouTube channel and at the Dave and Ashley Willis YouTube channel, but you can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcast. So however you like to get it.
Thanks, guys.